Hi, I'm Joseph Tipton, and welcome to A Peek at the Greek. The passage I would like to discuss today is 1 Thessalonians 5:8. Here, Paul is exhorting the Thessalonians to be vigilant and sober-minded, and to do so by putting on the helmet of the hope of salvation. This phrase, the helmet of the hope of salvation, is interesting because of that word hope. The word here is elpis. Now, this is a tough Greek word to translate. It's usually translated, as we've seen, as hope. But the problem with this is that in English, hope doesn't convey nearly as much certainty as the Greek word does. In English, if we say, I hope this or that happens, the degree of certainty we have is at best 50-50. If I say, I hope the Pirates win today, I don't know. They may or may not win. I just hope they do. There's not much certainty in that. But with the Greek word, the situation is entirely different. The degree of certainty is much greater. It can even be thought of as expectation. And this degree of certainty actually comes out in the passage that we're discussing today. Paul tells us to put on the helmet of the hope of salvation precisely because God has not ordained us for wrath, but for the acquisition of salvation. Now, this word ordained in Greek is etito, and it's a political term. It occurs everywhere in classical Greek political literature as the word for legislating, for laying down a law. And so what Paul is saying is that God himself has ordained that we should obtain salvation. And so, Paul concludes, since God himself has ordained it, has laid down the law, and nobody can repeal or annul a law that God has ordained. Since God himself has ordained it, the only logical response to it is hope. And so this kind of hope is far from being uncertain. It's actually completely certain. It's actually a cold, hard fact. If a friend or family member told us that they're coming next week for a visit, our response is not, gee, I hope they come. No, they told us they're coming. Our response is rather to get the house ready for their arrival and to await their arrival with eagerness and excitement. And that's the type of eagerness and excitement Paul is telling us to have with the Greek word elpis. He isn't telling us to wring our hands and hope for salvation. He's telling us to expect it and to let that expectation govern our hearts and our lives, causing us to be more vigilant and sober-minded. And if we have that kind of expectation, we will be. So that's the point I wanted to make for today's Peek at the Greek. Hopefully, pun intended, you found it helpful and encouraging. Thanks for watching.